All right, I see our numbers have settled out just a little bit, so we can get started. I'll just go over our poll questions quickly before I do. So our first question is, what percentage of people diagnosed with autoimmune diseases are women? And one person, a few said 20%, a few more said 40 and 80%, and the largest answer was 60%. Is that the right answer, Jill? 60%?
Shockingly, the correct answer is 80%, and that is from the Alberta Women's Health Foundation.
That's awful.
That is awful. The second question we had there to whet your palate is, what percentage of health research finding in Alberta supports women's health specifically? Quite a few people chose 3%. A few people chose 12%, but the most popular answer was 9%. And it is actually only 3% of our research is focused on women's health. So this brings us to the reason we are here today, to talk about gender disparity in women's health. And I will be happy to get us started just as soon as I get my screens straightened out. So good afternoon, everyone. I am Angela Saxby. I'm in my second term as the secretary for BPW Edmonton. Also helping me today is Jill Wallace. She's our communications chair for BPW Edmonton as well, and she'll be supporting as tech host. So if you have any questions, you can message her directly in the chat, and we'll hope to keep things smoothly by putting information in the chat as much as we can. And we'll also take your questions in the chat as well. So we'll be helping our moderator choose questions from the chat, so you can use that function if you need to. So it's lovely to see so many people here to talk about gender disparity in women's healthcare. Well, this is a very important topic, which we will get into right away here. It's just one of the topics that the BPW Edmonton Club is tackling this year. I'm also on spring break, and so are my lips, apparently. At the beginning of the year, our board set our strategic direction around 3 topics: diversity, equity, and inclusion, healthcare, and finally, how the labor market is affecting women. For each topic, we've hosted podcast clubs, meet and greets with our presenters, and of course, panel discussions like the one we have today. This is all in an effort to achieve our vision of a compassionate and powerful community of women who create a positive impact by inspiring and elevating women, so they then can inspire and elevate other women. We hope every connection you have with us enables you to go out and do the good work necessary to ensure women have the clout, power, and resources to do the good work that needs to be done. We here lean heavily on our values to create connections to support the greater good, to cultivate compassion for ourselves and others, and to celebrate and own our impact on the community. And we do this all through our 3 pillars of leadership, advocacy, and community. Our advocacy chair, who is here today with us, Lisa Feehan, has done amazing work with advocacy this year. Through a partnership with the University of Alberta, she had a group of students create a draft resolution that has been approved to go to the federal government for consideration. The resolution focuses on expanding supports for gender-based violence victims in rural and remote areas. Advocacy is one of the pillars of BPW Edmonton that sets us apart from other women's clubs, and we're proud to share it. We hope you are inspired today to take action in your community, become a member, or even join the board. So speaking of advocates, we have 3 amazing panelists here today who are advocates in their own right. I'd like to introduce them. So first we have Carmen Witten. Carmen is the founder and chair of the Women's Health Coalition, the president of Ripple Enterprises, and she currently serves on the Alberta College of Primary Care Council as a public member and on the executive of the Public Affairs Association of Canada for Alberta. Carmen has more than 30 years experience in the public, private, and charitable sector, including disabilities, seniors, sport, youth, education, workforce development, and health. She founded the Women's Health Coalition in 2017 to advocate for health system change and address barrier gaps and biases in sexual, reproductive, and menstrual health. Obviously, you could tell why she's one of our panelists today. Next up is Isabella Roth. Isabella offers a unique perspective on what healthcare challenges are disproportionately impacting women and how we can contribute to ending inequities in women's health. Isabella is an experienced healthcare professional with a demonstrated history of working in the hospital and healthcare industry. Skilled in nursing education, oncology, advanced cardiac life support, health promotion, and management. She's also a strong sales professional with a master's in business administration focused on health and healthcare. Isabella is the CEO of Infinity Healthcare Limited. Finally, we have Sandy Jacobson here. As Vice President of the Richardson Executive Search, Sandy specializes in talent management for senior executives and is focused on working with companies and organizations looking to attract top talent to improve or to impact their business and achieve overall company performance. Thank you all for taking the time to join us today to inspire and elevate women to inspire and elevate other women. Moderating our discussion today is our very own Jody Horvath. Jody is the membership chair for BPW Edmonton, and she's also the marketing manager at KBH Chartered Professional Accountant. Jody, I'll turn it over to you to get our conversation going.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And thank you again, everybody, for being here. We have spent quite a bit of time going through all these questions and knowing the type of content that we have. I'm going to jump right in so we have a chance to go through all of this because I'm certain there's going to be some really good conversation. And just a reminder, if you guys do have any questions, please put them in the chat. We'll try to address them as we go through those topics. And if we don't get to them, then we'll come back to it at the end of things. So that being said, I'm going to kick things off. And Carmen, I'm going to come straight to you. Tell me, do you believe that there are inequities in the healthcare system based on gender?
Thank you for that question, Jody. Without question, I believe there are inequities, and I could tell hundreds of stories that I've heard from other women. I'd like to start today, though, with a personal experience because this isn't hearsay in any way. It actually happened. I know it happened to me, and it happened recently. I went to the hospital because I did the splits without any training and completely detached my hamstring.
Ouch.
And so wound up in emergency like anybody would. And after they confirmed that nothing was broken, the next assumption is that there is probably a torn ligament, a detached hamstring, something along those lines. But the protocol in the emergency department is that women 50 or older are not considered eligible for surgery. And the reason for that is because they are expected to live a sedentary life, probably have an office job, and really don't need full function of their limbs after age 50. And so I was appalled by that. I had a very compassionate emergency room doctor who said, I'm not saying this is right. I'm saying this is what the protocol is, and I can't do anything other than what the prescribed protocol is. But he said, I would suggest you go talk to this doctor, and immediately referred me to a sport medicine doctor where, as my own advocate, I was able to get an appointment with him right away, get an assessment, get an MRI. And so all of this happened, I think, on a Tuesday or Wednesday, and by Saturday I was getting surgery. If I hadn't been a good advocate, then simply because I was a woman over 50, they would not have been looking at my function for at least a year. And then maybe if I was really having mobility challenges, they might have done some restorative surgery. And that was all just because I was female and I was over 50, but I was also I am very active and very sports minded, and that wasn't an acceptable outcome. So to your question, absolutely there are gender inequities. And like I said, I could tell hundreds of stories of women having been dismissed for decades simply because they are women, and whatever age they were at, it was easy to say that was normal.
I'll add to that too, Carmen. It seems like there's like a right age frame, because I see that with the clients that I have that are elderly. If you pass a certain age, they won't even consider any type of surgery. So just if you're not in that perfect range, good luck.
If I can also follow up on that too as well, just to say, I can assure you that, the average 50-year-old, again, a lot of us are very active in terms of, let's say, raising kids and working jobs and things like that too. So that's, disappointing to see that stereotyping exists.
Well, so now, Isabella, coming to you. You've spent a lot of your career in primary care. You are an RN, and I know half the time I see you, you're still in scrubs.
Yep.
Or trying to talk to you when you're visiting a client. Tell me, what do you think, or do you think men and women are treated or perceived differently when they go to the doctor?
Yeah, I do actually. And I'll give one example like Carmen did. I started my nursing career up in high level where we worked on First Nations reserves, and it was a really small town. And you couldn't go and pick up gravel or the aerosol spray without you giving them ID, right? Because a lot of people misuse them to get some sort of a high. And then I've been struggling with TMD, something with my jaw. Just think about really terrible migraines. And if it gets that bad, I have to take myself to the ER and take IV drugs. But the first time I went up there, he completely dismissed me and said, it's just your cramps, here's some Tylenol, you'll be fine. So I will never forget that because obviously I went home, I didn't get the medication, I was suffering, but the next day I came back to the hospital with a vengeance. And the doctor, I still talked to him, he said, yeah, I'm sorry, it's a typical caseload that what he gets, that people, all I wanted was some drugs, right? So he just automatically stereotyped me and wouldn't serve me. So that one I will never forget.
Absolutely. Can you tell me more about what the primary considerations are for a woman when she goes in to get care and when a man goes in to get care?
I don't know, because I think that because we're more open to sharing exactly how we're feeling, maybe it discounts the symptom or severity of them. And generally, if you're going to have somebody the same, relative pain, I think there is a little bit of a difference where the men don't, they kind of sit. But then never mind, because we've all seen those videos where we simulate labor pains with men, and we're rock stars. But I'm not sure why that happened, but I have seen it in my history. So I've done the federal government, provincial, and now the private side. So I have seen it. And maybe because women are more accustomed to speaking up and saying what they need, that's what I kind of see because I work in the hospitals up north. So it's a tough question.
Would you say that women are often first considered based on their age and the things that are going on in your life compared to men being more directly questioned about their symptoms?
So interesting point, because you said that the environment and the doctors up north, they considered the environment and the typical person coming into the emergency. I was just another person asking for the same thing my counterparts were coming, right? So I think it has a huge impact on where you are and where you're receiving healthcare and how you present. But I know we're going to talk about some more of this stuff, but I do believe that a lot of individuals and women don't believe they have a choice. And we put a lot of our trust into these healthcare professionals. They went to school, they know what's going on. Okay, I don't need this, maybe I need this and that. So I do see that there's that level of trust immediately with somebody in healthcare. So somebody tells you to do something, likely will do it, unless you have other advocates for you that work in the healthcare system.
And that's a great theme to bring it back to. And you'll notice, just for everybody out there, you'll notice that we talk quite a bit about advocacy throughout this, not just because it's part of what we do at BPW, but also you can see from the stories that we've already had shared from Carmen and Isabella, that being your own advocate is something that's incredibly important. And that's a bit of a burden that women have at a higher rate than men, especially when it comes to their healthcare.
So Jody, can I just add to what Isabella was saying? And
I
you were
was gonna
asking
ask
the
you.
question about whether men and women are treated differently. And I think that, again, I'm going to say absolutely yes, but we can even use some specific conditions. So as per my intro, I do a lot in gynecological health, sexual, menstrual, and reproductive health. It's very easy for a healthcare practitioner to immediately assume whatever is going on is based on the fact that the patient is a woman and has some what they would refer to as classic symptoms for that stage of their life, whether it's menopause. A woman over 40 is immediately going to be assumed that they're going through perimenopausal conditions, and it won't even matter what the symptom is. They would never do that to a man. When you opened up with the poll about research, one of the things that has been a criticism is that cardiovascular conditions in women haven't been well studied, and as a result, women are dying. And so it's because when they go to the doctor with the early warning signs of cardiovascular conditions, they are dismissed. That wouldn't happen to a man, because when a woman comes in, they say, "How old are you?" When a man goes in, they say, "Tell me what's wrong." We have to change that narrative.
Carmen, when we were doing our sessions, just to practice for this, you mentioned something about how it's not necessarily studied how heart attacks present in women compared to in men. And I don't want to butcher the stats, but I also believe there was something about how women are less likely to get treatment because a heart attack is viewed as less painful than their period cramps.
I don't think that was my comment, but there's no question that not only will the health system dismiss the signs of women's cardiovascular conditions, but the woman herself will as well. And part of that is attributable to an attitude about being superwoman. When you're taking care of parents and kids and job and everything else, you ignore those early warning signs, or you attribute them to, just general life pressures, or I've got symptoms of the flu. I think probably Isabella is probably better to answer this. And even, like Sandy in the workplace would deal with women who are having less than perfect days, and they just keep going because it's how we think. It's what we think we were supposed to do. So I don't know about the difference between a heart attack and menstrual pains or delivery or any of those kinds of things. But again, I would defer to either of my panel colleagues to be more specific about that.
Sandy, you mentioned something about the life cycle when women are professional and without children, with children, and that sandwich generation. And I thought that would be a really great thing to kind of back on with what Carmen said, because I thought that was profound. I did.
For sure. I don't know, Jody, if that segues into your next question about.
It absolutely does. And so I'm just going to let you guys run with it.
Wonderful. So now we were kind of talking about kind of how women are they being disadvantaged in the workplace. And I think that there's a lot of things I can share from a workplace perspective. I've been probably in the recruitment, industry or sector for over 17 years. So I've seen it really shift a lot, but a lot of the stigmatism around still female recruitment still kind of exists, right? I know that women sometimes are viewed as they've got two careers, right? Post, I guess, they're pre-kids and then after kids, post-kids. So sometimes it may be breaking their, resume. So sometimes employers, when we're kind of looking at that and you're kind of explaining why somebody's kind of getting back into the workplace or there's a gap on their, resume, that sometimes gets a bit of bias. And then I also think too, as well, in the workplace, when you look at sort of advancement, there is definitely stats that show that there's less leadership around females for sure. And I think also because women will only apply for jobs that they know that they can do, whereas a lot of men will actually apply for anything that they feel they can do. But women are a lot more accurate around, I'm not going to apply for something that I really don't have the scope for or will not. So a lot of times women aren't quite as aggressive, let's say, in terms of applying for roles in terms of leadership. I also think too, when you're balancing, let's say, things too as well, let's say if you do have career, family, you're married and there's lots of life sort of challenges as well too. As females, usually we're kind of more the providers around taking kids to and from school or having that flexibility when you have, let's say, one of your children are sick and you get the call from school or daycare that you need to be able to pick them up immediately. Usually the female is the one that has to take that role. So that sometimes is viewed into the workplace where, I've got maybe 5 personal days or so many sick days. I've now used them up in terms of my kids being able to, the challenge around, let's say, a flu or something like that too. So now if I'm sick, I don't want to take a day off because, you tend to sort of always put yourself in that back seat. So those are some stats that I can kind of go on, more and more as well, where, now with COVID, that shift now in the last couple of years, women tend to have a lot more of the responsibility when, we're working from home, now schools are now working from home and do virtual learning, trying to balance your career on top of having 1, 2, 3 kids you've got sort of, work plans for. So that's got a whole other, challenge. So you've seen a lot of women that have left the workforce, even that have maybe decided maybe they've lost their spot in terms of, daycare as well, or maybe it's easier from a stress perspective just with that on and off in terms of being virtual and not to stay at home. So you've got that stability. And then also too, now when you look at, whether it's in person, again, we're trying to get back into remote, hybrid, a lot of women too as well, if it's in person only, I think there's still a stigmatism around, again, if you have to have that flexibility, or men can have a much easier hybrid or sort of remote expectancy as females. They always think, oh, you're probably running kids to and from or doing laundry, or there's still a bit of that bias that I think exists in the workplace.
Okay. Can I follow up on that with one of the questions from our audience? How difficult would you say it is for women compared to men to go back to work after taking a break? And for example, if I took off 3 months for, let's call it mental health, is it harder for me to go back than it would be for my husband?
Definitely. And I think that's still, and that's what I think as females, what I really like about, again, our discussion today and having sort of groups like this too, that can kind of really, gather to advocate and sort of educate and connect and communicate, because women have to be our own advocates, whether it's through health, whether it's supporting other women leaders, whether it's women in the workplace, whether it's women in terms of mental health or having some health challenges, right? So I do think it is perceived probably more as a weakness if, let's say, a female had to take 3 months off, or maybe it was a medical condition or whatnot too, whereas if a male did, it was more, a shoulder repair, no problem, right? So you come back and it just means you got hurt in a sport and you're coming back and you're ready to perform, right? So there is unfortunately still that bias. And even I'll even skip to, with again, going on sort of, maternity leave and with paternal leave and stuff like that too. I know, we had a situation with a client, recently that, it was for a role where, they were expecting, and, because there was the risk maybe that he might be taking paternal leave, again, it was gender bias on a male, that they didn't want to hire the individual because they couldn't take the risk of hiring somebody and then they're off in a month or 3 months.
Carmen, can I get you to follow up on that as well? I know you've got some thoughts on the unconscious bias with employers and, women and children and mat leave or pat leave.
Well, I think that, Sandy touched on a lot of the experiences that I have heard stories about. I know that we were talking a little about women in leadership. And so when a woman rises in her industry, particularly if that's a male-dominated industry, she's very likely to try to diminish any actual physical health issues or mental health issues that she's experiencing because of the fear that will hold her back, the fear that will launch some stereotypes about women in the workplace, and actually then physically hold them back from continuing to grow inside the company. And I can, I gave you some examples, some workplace examples when we met beforehand about women in trades is a really big deal right now. And trades in Alberta is a big push because it's such a huge opportunity for lifelong success and continuity and in next careers and all of that kind of thing. So we talk a good story about that. But the reality is that the field experience for women doesn't actually support their health. And so they could be going onto job sites that don't have a washroom. And so what happens is they get put behind a desk instead of on the tools so that they don't have to deal with menstrual management or, I've actually heard stories of women who don't drink because they know that there's not going to be any place where they're going to be able to go to the washroom. Well, the urinary tract conditions that can generate is serious. It's extremely serious, and it would never be a consideration for a man. They just find the nearest tree, and the worksite doesn't consider those kinds of things. So, but I mean, it could be around the boardroom table. You know, they say they're going to treat women equally, and you've got one of 9 board members or like senior executives that is female. What do they do for their team building? They go golfing. Well, I'm sorry, that's not gender equity. And in fact, there could be days where an 18-hole game of golf is not the best experience that a female leader is going to have, but she has no choice but to go. In reality, I wish the reality was that she had a choice. Sandy, tell me I'm wrong, but I don't think she has a choice if she wants to keep up.
No, she doesn't. If I can even pair onto that too as well, when you talked about looking at diversity and inclusion and talking about having more females on boards, let's say agencies and commissions and whatnot too, you hear a lot of backlash from some, I would say, of our male counterparts sometimes saying some of these positions sit vacant for so long as well because they can't find qualified female to take that spot. Which I know that kind of frustrates me a little bit too as well, because there's a lot of qualified female talent out there. But you're right, golf, maybe a lot of people, let's say if you're exposed to golf, great. If you don't, I mean, it'd be great to have something that'd be a bit more, have a female, let's say, sort of say, okay, we're going to actually do craft.
Sandy, I have a question for you, because you're in like executive recruitment. What is the main reason those women aren't being considered if that job is laid vacant for a while?
A lot of times just access to opportunities. So maybe you don't even know, for example, when a term is coming up, and let's say I'm just going to throw McEwen University out there too, and that's not probably fair to say, but let's say an example like that, when these vacancies are rotating, so maybe you miss an opportunity. So you should, be able to be on a roster when there's various, whether it's paid boards or not, or is it, do you have to be part of ICD, right? To be able to get access to those opportunities. So I just think it's more about not knowing or not having people tap you on the shoulder, for those opportunities versus us having to be an advocate and really sell ourselves to find those opportunities.
So Isabella, to tailor in on this, let's come to your perspective from being the CEO of Infinity Health and just talk about women working in healthcare.